I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 34, and I stood frozen in my own driveway, staring at my colonial home lit up like Times Square with cars parked all over my lawn. Through the bay windows, I could see almost 100 people drinking, laughing, and dancing under a massive banner reading "Family means forever," a cruel joke considering what my sister Melanie had done. What they didn't know was that I'd caught an earlier flight home from London specifically to confront her about stealing my inheritance and identity for the past 3 years. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Is family drama something you've experienced too? Hit that like button if you've ever had that moment where you realized family isn't always what it seems. Subscribe if you want more stories about how I navigated the treacherous waters of betrayal and eventually found justice. Trust me, what happens next in this house full of people who thought they knew the truth will show you exactly why blood isn't always thicker than water. 3 years ago, my grandmother Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82. She was a formidable woman who had built a successful real estate empire from nothing after my grandfather died young. Growing up, I was the only grandchild who showed any interest in property development. While my sister Melanie was busy partying through college, I was shadowing Grandma Eleanor at open houses and learning about investment strategies. The reading of the will took place in the oak-paneled conference room of her attorney's office. I remember the hushed anticipation as Mr. Goldstein adjusted his reading glasses and began to read the document. My aunts, uncles, and cousins shifted nervously in their seats. My sister Melanie sat beside me, squeezing my hand in what I thought was solidarity. To my granddaughter, Cassandra Mitchell, who has shown true interest and aptitude in continuing my legacy, I leave Mitchell Real Estate Holdings in its entirety, including all properties, accounts, and assets associated with the business, valued at approximately $14 million. The silence in the room was deafening. I felt Melanie's hand go limp in mine. I glanced at her, expecting to see disappointment, but instead caught something darker flashing across her face before she quickly composed herself and offered me a tight smile. "Congratulations, Cass," she whispered. "You deserve it." Grandmother had made provisions for everyone else too, sizable cash inheritances, jewelry, and personal items. Melanie received $500,000 and grandmother's vacation home in Maine. It seemed fair to me, especially considering I had worked alongside grandmother for years while Melanie had barely visited. Fast forward to 3 years later. The business was thriving under my leadership. I had expanded into commercial real estate and opened 2 new branch offices. I was preparing for a major real estate conference in London, a 2-week trip that would potentially open European markets for our company. The day before my flight, I gave Melanie the spare key to my house. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend and was between apartments. "Just to water the plants and check the mail," she said, hugging me tightly. "Have an amazing time in London. You work too hard, Cass." I remember feeling touched by her concern. After our parents died in that terrible car accident when Melanie was only 12, I had essentially raised her despite being only 7 years older. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but I thought we had grown closer in recent years. 4 days into my London trip, I received a disturbing call from Timothy Wilson, our family accountant who had worked with grandmother for decades and stayed on with me. "Cassandra, I'm sorry to bother you in London, but there's been some unusual activity in the business accounts," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "What kind of activity?" I asked, immediately alert. "Large transfers to accounts I don't recognize. And there are documents being signed with your signature that haven't crossed my desk first. Standard procedures aren't being followed." I asked him to email me the details, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Nearly $2 million had been moved to new accounts in the past 3 months. Properties were being sold at suspicious prices. And worst of all, Timothy included scanned copies of documents with my signature, signatures I had never made. I immediately called our main office. The receptionist, Angela, sounded confused. "But Ms. Mitchell, you were just here yesterday for the meeting with Westfield developers." "Angela, I'm in London. I have been for 4 days." A long pause. That's impossible. "I saw you. You were wearing that red blazer you like. Your hair was up in a bun. You even stopped to compliment my new desk plant. My mind raced. There was only one person who could pass for me well enough to fool people who knew me. Melanie and I had always looked similar, same chestnut hair, same green eyes, same tall, slender build. With the right clothes and hairstyle, she could easily be mistaken for me, especially by people who didn't know us well. I spent the next 24 hours in a frantic investigation. I called business associates, banks, and property managers. A disturbing pattern emerged. Cassandra Mitchell had been extremely active in business dealings over the past few months, but particularly in the last few days since I'd been in London. I accessed my home security system remotely and watched in horror as footage showed Melanie entering and leaving my house at all hours, sometimes with Timothy Wilson, the very accountant who had called to warn me. In one clip, they were laughing, sharing a bottle of my vintage champagne as Melanie tried on my clothes. The final straw came when I logged into my personal email and found messages I'd never sent, correspondence with family members telling them I was considering selling the business due to stress and inability to handle the pressure. There were even emails to my doctor asking about medications for anxiety and depression, creating a paper trail to question my mental stability. I immediately booked a flight home, cutting my London trip short by 10 days. On the plane, I scrolled through social media and discovered that Melanie had posted an invitation to a special family reunion at my house tomorrow night. The caption read, "Celebrating family and new beginnings at Cassandra's beautiful home. She's been so generous to let me host while she's enjoying Europe. Family means forever. #blessed #family." In the photo, she was standing in my living room, wearing my clothes, looking exactly like me from a distance. The comments were filled with relatives confirming their attendance and expressing excitement about the big news Melanie had hinted at sharing. I landed in Boston seething with rage and heartbreak. My own sister, whom I had raised, fed, clothed, and loved, had been systematically stealing my identity, my business, and my life. And she was using my home to host a party, where she would likely announce her complete takeover. As I pulled into my neighborhood and saw the cars lining the street, I realized I had arrived a day earlier than Melanie expected. The element of surprise was my only advantage now. I parked my rental car 3 blocks away and approached my house on foot. The colonial-style home I had lovingly restored was now lit up like a carnival, with unfamiliar cars parked haphazardly across my meticulously maintained lawn. Music pulsed from inside, and through the windows I could see silhouettes of people dancing and mingling. Rather than barging through the front door, I circled around to the back of the house. I pulled a baseball cap low over my face and put on large sunglasses despite the evening hour. The garden gate was unlocked. Melanie never remembered to secure it, and I slipped into my own backyard unnoticed. Through the French doors leading to the kitchen, I could see caterers bustling about. One of them stepped outside for a cigarette break, and I seized the opportunity to slip in behind him as he returned. In my own kitchen, nobody gave me a second glance. I was just another guest at this massive gathering. The house I had carefully decorated was transformed. Floral arrangements that weren't my style dominated every surface. A photo display in the hallway showcased Melanie throughout the years. Many pictures of her with my grandmother that I knew for a fact had originally included me. My stomach churned as I realized she must have digitally altered the family photos. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing server and moved through the crowd, eavesdropping on conversations. Melanie has done such amazing things with the business. I overheard a distant cousin telling his wife, "Who would have thought she had such a head for real estate? And so generous, letting her sister use the vacation home in Maine while she handles everything here," another relative added. "Though I heard Cassandra has been in Europe for months now. Seems like she's just abandoned her responsibilities." Well, Grandma Eleanor always did favor Cassandra, but look how that turned out. Thank goodness Melanie stepped up. I nearly crushed the champagne flute in my hand. The narrative Melanie had created was becoming clear. I was the irresponsible sister who couldn't handle the inheritance and had run away to Europe, while she was the responsible one stepping in to save the family business. As I moved deeper into the party, I spotted an elderly woman sitting alone on the window seat in the living room. With a jolt, I recognized my great-aunt Patricia, my grandmother's sister, who had always been kind to me. I hesitated, then approached her, keeping my face partially obscured. "Hello, Aunt Patricia," I said softly, taking the seat beside her. She squinted at me through her thick glasses. "Do I know you, dear? You look familiar." "I'm a friend of Cassandra's," I said, testing the waters. "Oh, how lovely. I haven't seen Cassandra in ages. Melanie says she's traveling through Europe indefinitely. Between us, I'm a bit worried about her." Melanie mentioned something about exhaustion and possible depression. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "But I've always thought Cassandra was the stronger one. Raising Melanie after Robert and Diana died wasn't easy." "No, it wasn't," I agreed carefully. "Are you here for the big announcement?" Aunt Patricia asked. "Melanie's been very mysterious about it, but Timothy's mother let slip that he bought a ring last week. I think we might be celebrating an engagement tonight." My blood ran cold. Timothy Wilson, the family accountant who had worked with my grandmother for decades and whom I had trusted with the business finances, was not only helping Melanie steal from me, but was apparently planning to marry her too. "When did Melanie and Timothy start dating?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, must be about a year now. Very discreet at first because of the professional relationship, you understand. But they make such a handsome couple. And with Cassandra away so much, I suppose Melanie has had to rely on Timothy for business guidance." Just then, a ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. I looked up to see Melanie making a grand entrance down the staircase, my staircase, wearing a stunning blue evening gown I had never seen before. But what made my heart stop was the necklace glittering at her throat. My grandmother's diamond necklace, specifically bequeathed to me in the will, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Beside her walked Timothy Wilson, tall and distinguished in a tuxedo, looking every inch the successful businessman. They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations and well wishes from my family members and business associates. "Don't they look wonderful together?" Aunt Patricia sighed. "I think Grandma Eleanor would approve, don't you?" I couldn't trust myself to speak. I mumbled something about needing the restroom and slipped away before my emotions betrayed me. Instead of heading to the bathroom, I made my way to my home office. If Melanie was planning what I suspected, there would be evidence here. The door was locked, but I had a hidden key behind a loose section of baseboard that Melanie didn't know about. Once inside, I locked the door behind me and went straight to my computer. The password had been changed, but I had a backup admin account Melanie wouldn't know about. I logged in and began searching through recent files. What I found was worse than I had imagined. Emails between Melanie and Timothy detailed their plan to gradually take control of all my assets. There were documents showing properties being sold to Timothy's brother at below-market rates. Draft press releases announcing Melanie as the new CEO of Mitchell Real Estate Holdings. And most alarmingly, wedding plans, not just an engagement, but a full wedding scheduled for next month at the Plaza Hotel in New York. In Melanie's email drafts, I found a message addressed to the entire family, explaining that I had suffered a mental breakdown and had decided to remain in Europe indefinitely, while signing over power of attorney to her. The email was scheduled to be sent tomorrow. I downloaded everything I could onto a USB drive, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. As I was about to log out, a calendar notification popped up. Announcement 9 p.m. I checked my watch. 20 minutes from now, Melanie and Timothy would be making their big announcement, likely their engagement, and possibly my supposed breakdown as well. I needed to act fast. With evidence in hand and 20 minutes until Melanie's announcement, I needed allies and a strategy. I slipped out of the office and found a quiet corner in the guest bedroom to make some calls. My first call was to Rachel Campbell, my college roommate who had become a successful corporate attorney. We had remained close over the years, and she was one of the few people who could easily tell Melanie and me apart. "Rachel, it's Cassandra. The real Cassandra," I said as soon as she answered. "Cass? Aren't you in London? I was. I'm back, and I'm in serious trouble. Melanie has been impersonating me and stealing my business assets. She's about to announce her engagement to my accountant, who's been helping her. Rachel didn't waste time with disbelief. Where are you now? At my house. Melanie's throwing a huge family party here. I'm in disguise. Don't confront her yet, Rachel advised. You need to document everything first. Take photos of any documents you find. Record conversations if you can. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, but given the circumstances of fraud. I've already downloaded emails and files, I told her. But I need more than digital evidence. People might claim I fabricated it. Get statements from people who can confirm they've been dealing with you while you were verifiably in London. And call Detective Rivera. Detective Marcus Rivera had investigated an embezzlement case at our firm the previous year when one of our property managers had been skimming money. He had been thorough and fair, and I had his direct number. I'll head to your house now, Rachel said. Text me when you're ready for backup. My next calls were to business associates who could confirm they'd met with me while I was in London. Jacob Stern from Westfield Developers was particularly helpful. I have the meeting recorded, Cassandra, he said. It's my standard practice. I can send it to you right away. Please do, I said. And Jacob, when you met with me, or who you thought was me, did you notice anything unusual? Now that you mention it, you seemed different. More aggressive in negotiations. And you didn't remember our conversation about my daughter's college graduation, which we had discussed at length during our previous meeting. I called 3 more business contacts and heard similar stories. Each one confirmed meetings with Cassandra Mitchell during times I could prove I was in London. I had them email confirmations and any documentation they had. Next, I called Detective Rivera. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Ms. Mitchell, this is unexpected. I quickly explained the situation, my voice low to avoid being overheard. That's a serious accusation, he said when I finished. Identity theft, fraud, possibly conspiracy. But family cases are complicated. Do you have evidence? Growing by the minute, I assured him. But I need time to gather more. Don't confront them yet, he advised, echoing Rachel. Document everything. Get statements. I'll start the paperwork on my end, but without you filing an official report in person, I can't move forward yet. I understand. But can you be ready? When I do confront them, things might get ugly. Text me the address. I'll have a patrol car in the vicinity. With those calls made, I slipped back into the party. There were still 10 minutes until the announcement, and I needed more evidence of Melanie's deception. I moved through the crowd, listening carefully to conversations, occasionally asking innocent questions about Cassandra's European trip or Melanie's work with the business. The story Melanie had created was consistent. I had suffered from stress and possibly mental health issues after inheriting the business, gradually withdrawing from responsibilities until finally taking an extended break in Europe, while she valiantly stepped in to keep things running. Some relatives even hinted that grandmother Eleanor had chosen wrong in her will. As I passed the library, I overheard Timothy's voice from inside. The door was ajar, and I could see him speaking with a man I recognized as his brother, Frank. Tonight's the night, little brother, Frank was saying. After 3 years of planning, you're finally going to lock it down. Melanie's done most of the heavy lifting, Timothy replied. She's been perfect, learning the business, impersonating Cassandra, laying the groundwork for the transfer of assets. And no suspicions from anyone? None. Everyone thinks Cassandra is having a breakdown in Europe. The family's already rallying around Melanie as the responsible one. Once we announce the engagement and hint at Cassandra's condition, we'll have the family's support to take legal action for control of the remaining assets. And if Cassandra comes back, Timothy's laugh was cold. We've established a paper trail of erratic behavior, medical consultations for mental health issues, and financial mismanagement. Plus, Melanie's been sending emails from Cassandra's account for months, gradually alienating business contacts and family members. If she shows up now, she'll look like the unstable one. You always were the smart one, Tim. Dad would be proud. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. This wasn't just an opportunistic theft. This was a years-long conspiracy. The betrayal cut even deeper, knowing they had been planning this since shortly after my grandmother's death. With minutes to spare before the announcement, I ducked into a bathroom to collect myself. As I splashed water on my face, memories from the past 3 years began to fall into place. Brandon, my fiancé, breaking up with me unexpectedly, claiming I had sent him hurtful messages he couldn't forgive. Family members becoming increasingly distant, citing my changed behavior and concerning emails. Business relationships that had suddenly cooled without explanation. It hadn't just been about the money. Melanie had been systematically destroying my relationships and reputation, laying the groundwork for my replacement, not just in the business, but in the family itself. I stared at my reflection, a strange calm settling over me. In a few minutes, Melanie would make her announcement, thinking she had won. But I had the advantage of surprise, and now, growing evidence of her betrayal. I texted Rachel, "They're making the announcement at 9. Be ready." Her reply came immediately. "Parked outside. Detective Rivera is nearby too. Give the signal when you're ready." I straightened my shoulders, adjusted my disguise, and prepared to watch my sister announce her engagement to the man who had helped her steal my life. With minutes remaining before Melanie's announcement, I slipped out of the bathroom and back into the crowd, staying close to the walls. The guests were being herded toward the living room, where Melanie and Timothy stood beneath the "Family Means Forever" banner, champagne flutes in hand. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "In position outside. Detective Rivera has 2 officers with him." I replied quickly, "Stand by. Need more evidence." As guests filled the living room, I noticed a server leaving a tray of champagne on a side table before heading back to the kitchen. I grabbed a flute and positioned myself behind a group of distant cousins, partially hidden by a large floral arrangement. Melanie looked radiant in my grandmother's diamonds, her arm linked with Timothy's. She had even styled her hair exactly like mine, with the same side part and loose waves I preferred. The resemblance was uncanny and disturbing. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying across the now quiet room. "It means so much to have our family together to share this special moment." The crowd murmured appreciatively, and I used their distraction to edge closer, staying behind taller guests. "Before I share our news," Melanie continued, "I want to acknowledge how difficult these past few years have been for our family. As many of you know, my sister Cassandra has been struggling with the pressures of running grandmother's business. Her decision to take an extended break in Europe has been challenging for all of us, but especially for me, as I've had to step into her role at Mitchell Real Estate." Sympathetic nods rippled through the audience. My blood boiled at how easily she had turned my family against me. While I wish Cassandra could be here tonight, I'm grateful for the support each of you has shown as I've navigated these unexpected responsibilities. And no one has been more supportive than this wonderful man beside me. Timothy smiled modestly, playing the role of devoted partner perfectly. As Melanie launched into a story about how Timothy had been her rock during these difficult times, I used the opportunity to slip through a side door and down the hallway to my bedroom. If Melanie had been living in my house and impersonating me, there would be more evidence there. My bedroom door was unlocked. Inside, I found my closet transformed. Half my clothes were gone, replaced by similar but newer items in Melanie's size. My makeup had been replaced with products suited to her slightly different coloring. On the dresser sat a framed photo of Melanie and Timothy that had been digitally altered to include my grandmother, all 3 smiling as if they were the perfect family. I pulled open the bedside drawer and found a small leather journal I didn't recognize. Flipping it open, I saw Melanie's handwriting and began to read, "April 15th, another successful meeting as Cassandra. No one suspects a thing. The hair dye and contacts make the transformation complete. Timothy says in another month we can start the major asset transfers. Asterisk May 3rd, sent more unstable emails from Cassandra's account to her friends, slowly isolating her from everyone who might help her. The family already believes she's having problems. It's almost too easy. Asterisk June 20th. Found old photos of Cassandra with grandmother. Digitally removed her and inserted myself instead. We'll display them at the announcement party. History is written by the victors, after all. Asterisk my hands trembled as I turned to more recent entries. August 8th. Consultation with Dr. Morris about subtle facial adjustments to look more like Cassandra. Nothing dramatic, just enough to enhance the resemblance. Timothy thinks it's unnecessary, but he doesn't understand how deep this needs to go. Asterisk September 14th. Continued the specialty regimen for grandmother Eleanor before she died. No one suspected a thing. The toxins are untraceable, and her natural death gave me the opportunity one needed. Cassandra was always her favorite, but look who's winning now. Asterisk I nearly dropped the journal. My grandmother's death, had Melanie actually poisoned her? The implications were staggering. This wasn't just fraud and identity theft, it was potentially murder. I photographed the most damning pages with my phone, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. As I replaced the journal exactly as I'd found it, I noticed a small locked box under the bed. Using a hairpin from the dresser, I managed to pick the simple lock, a skill grandmother had surprisingly taught both of us. Inside were dozens of letters and emails. A correspondence between me and Brandon during our relationship. Some were actual messages we had exchanged, but others were clearly fabricated, written to look like I had been unfaithful, unstable, even threatening. There was even a fake email where I had confessed to a non-existent affair with Brandon's best friend. Now I understood why he had ended our engagement so abruptly 2 years ago, refusing to even speak with me. Melanie had systematically destroyed the most important relationship in my life out of sheer jealousy. I photographed these two, then carefully replaced everything and slipped back into the hallway. As I headed toward the living room, I heard applause erupting. I had missed the actual engagement announcement. Rejoining the crowd, I saw Melanie flashing a massive diamond ring as Timothy beamed beside her. Family members were lining up to congratulate them, champagne flowing freely. In that moment, something inside me broke. The careful plan to gather evidence before confronting them seemed insufficient, given the depth of Melanie's betrayal. She hadn't just stolen my business and my identity. She had potentially murdered our grandmother, destroyed my relationship with Brandon, and poisoned my family against me. All while wearing my clothes, living in my house, and now, preparing to marry a man who had helped her commit these crimes. I found myself moving forward, pushing through the crowd, the disguise suddenly suffocating. I pulled off the sunglasses and hat, letting them fall to the floor. A hush began to spread through the room as people recognized me, confusion and shock registering on their faces. Melanie was mid-sentence, accepting congratulations from our cousin Diana, when she looked up and saw me standing 10 feet away. The color drained from her face. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "Hello, sister," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "I'm home early." If you've ever experienced that moment when you realize someone close to you has been living a complete lie, then you know the icy feeling spreading through my chest right then. I was standing in my own living room, surrounded by my own family, all of whom were looking at me like I was the impostor. Before I reveal what happened next in this twisted family drama, take a second to hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories about how betrayal can come from those we trust most. This next part shows exactly how far Melanie was willing to go, and trust me, it's beyond what any of us could have imagined. Time seemed to stand still as Melanie and I locked eyes across my living room. The crowd of family members and friends fell completely silent, heads swiveling between us like spectators at a tennis match. For twins, the resemblance would have been remarkable, but we weren't twins. Melanie had deliberately cultivated her appearance to mirror mine, down to the highlights in her hair and the shape of her eyebrows. Timothy was the first to recover, stepping slightly in front of Melanie in a protective gesture that might have seemed gallant to anyone who didn't know the truth. "Cassandra," he said smoothly. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you back from Europe for weeks." "Clearly," I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. You were counting on me being far away while you announced your engagement. Congratulations, by the way. I'm sure you and my sister will be very happy together. At least until the fraud charges catch up with you. A murmur ran through the crowd. Aunt Patricia pushed forward, her aged face contorted in confusion. Cassandra? But I thought. Melanie said you were. She looked back and forth between us, clearly distressed. Melanie finally found her voice. Cassandra, you're supposed to be in London. What happened? Are you feeling all right? Her tone was perfectly calibrated to sound concerned while implying I was unstable. I was in London, I confirmed, addressing the room rather than just Melanie. Until I received some troubling information about unusual activity in my business accounts. Imagine my surprise when I discovered someone had been impersonating me for months, conducting meetings, signing documents, and systematically transferring my assets away from me. Timothy stepped forward, his expression serious. Cassandra, these accusations are concerning. We've all been worried about your mental health lately. The stress of running the business, the erratic emails, the impulsive decision to leave the country indefinitely. Stop, I said firmly. Your act might work on people who don't know what you've been doing, but I have evidence. I pulled out my phone and held it up. Emails between the two of you planning this fraud. Recordings of business meetings Melanie attended pretending to be me while I was verifiably in London. Documentation of property transfers to Timothy's brother at below-market rates. And most disturbing of all, Melanie's journal, where she details not only her scheme but suggests she may have been poisoning our grandmother before her death. Gasps echoed around the room. Melanie's face contorted with rage for a split second before she composed herself into a mask of concern. Everyone, she addressed the stunned crowd, my sister has been under tremendous pressure. These delusions about me stealing her identity are symptoms of her deteriorating mental state. Timothy and I have been consulting with doctors about getting her the help she needs. Is that why you've been sending emails from my account painting me as unstable? I challenged. Is that why you have a drawer full of fabricated correspondence designed to destroy my relationship with Brandon? Is that why you've been slowly altering your appearance to look more like me? The crowd's eyes moved to Melanie, many seeing for the first time the deliberate resemblance she had cultivated. Timothy tried again. These are serious but unfounded accusations. Cassandra, we only want what's best for you. Why don't we discuss this privately? He took a step toward the side door, but at that moment, it opened to reveal Rachel standing there, arms crossed. The discussion won't be private, I'm afraid, she said. As Cassandra's attorney, I've been documenting this fraud for the past hour. From the main entrance, Detective Rivera appeared with two uniformed officers. Timothy Wilson and Melanie Mitchell? I believe we need to have a conversation about identity theft and financial fraud. Timothy's face hardened. He grabbed Melanie's arm and tried to pull her toward the back of the house. We don't have to listen to this. She has no proof. Actually, came a voice from the crowd, she does. Jacob Stern from Westfield Developers stepped forward. I have recorded meetings with someone claiming to be Cassandra Mitchell during times she was provably in London. I've already provided these recordings to Ms. Mitchell and her attorney. Another business associate, Diane Wong, stepped forward. I've been dealing with someone I thought was Cassandra for months. Looking at them side by side now, I can see the differences. I signed contracts with an impostor. Timothy's face had gone pale. He released Melanie's arm and began edging toward the back door. Officers, Detective Rivera said calmly, please ensure Mr. Wilson doesn't leave. One of the uniformed officers moved to block Timothy's escape route. Melanie, seeing her accomplice's attempted flight, seemed to crumble. Her carefully constructed facade began to crack. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising. None of you understand. It was always Cassandra. Always perfect Cassandra, who grandmother loved best. Who got the business, the money, the success. Melanie, I said softly, grandmother left you $500,000 and the main house. That's hardly nothing. Nothing compared to what you got, she screamed, all pretense abandoned. I was her granddaughter too, but you were always the favorite. Even when we were children after our parents died, you became the responsible one, the mature one, the one everyone admired. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow my entire life? The room had gone completely silent. No one moved as Melanie continued her tirade. You raised me, you controlled me, made me feel like I was never good enough. Then grandmother dies, and what happens? She rewards you for being exactly like her and leaves me with crumbs. So you decided to become me? I said, the pieces finally falling into place. If you couldn't have what I had, you'd take it by becoming me. And it worked. Melanie laughed, a brittle, unhinged sound. I was better at being you than you were. Ask anyone here. They preferred me as Cassandra to the real thing. Detective Rivera stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, I think we have enough now. Would you like to press charges? Before I could answer, Aunt Patricia's wavering voice cut through the tension. I knew something wasn't right. All eyes turned to her as she stepped forward, her aged hands trembling. When I spoke with Cassandra over these past months, something felt wrong. She didn't remember the name of my first cat, which the real Cassandra and I had discussed many times. She didn't have the same laugh. But I told myself I was just being a forgetful old woman. Other family members began to murmur similar observations. Cousin Diana stepped forward, looking stricken. Melanie asked me to notarize some documents for Cassandra a few months ago. I thought I was helping. Oh God, I helped her commit fraud. As the reality of Melanie's deception sank in, the mood in the room shifted from shock to anger. Family members who had been congratulating her minutes earlier now backed away, eyes wide with disbelief. Timothy, seeing the situation deteriorating rapidly, made one final desperate attempt. This is all a misunderstanding. Melanie was only trying to help the business while Cassandra was away. Any documents signed were with implied consent. Save it for your lawyer, Detective Rivera said, nodding to one of the officers who stepped forward with handcuffs. Timothy Wilson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. As Timothy was being handcuffed, Melanie seemed to deflate, the fight leaving her body. She reached up and unclasped our grandmother's diamond necklace, letting it fall to the floor. You win again, Cassandra, she said quietly as the second officer approached her with handcuffs. You always do. As my sister and her fiancé were led away in handcuffs, the family means forever banner seemed to mock us all from above. The days following Melanie and Timothy's arrest were a blur of police statements, legal meetings, and difficult conversations. The family reunion had dispersed in shocked disarray that night, with relatives departing in stunned silence or staying behind to offer stunned apologies for believing Melanie's lies. Rachel had been invaluable, handling the immediate legal implications while I dealt with the emotional aftermath. Detective Rivera had been equally supportive, ensuring the case was treated with the seriousness it deserved despite the family connection. We've only scratched the surface of their scheme, he told me during our follow-up meeting at the police station. The financial fraud is clear-cut, but we're also investigating Melanie's journal entries about your grandmother. The medical examiner is reviewing the case, and we may need to exhume the body. The thought of my grandmother's peaceful rest being disturbed was painful, but the possibility that Melanie had hastened her death was too serious to ignore. Do whatever is necessary, I told him. If Melanie did something to harm my grandmother, I want to know. The business implications were equally complex. Timothy had been deeply embedded in the company's finances for years, and untangling the web of fraudulent transactions would take months. The properties sold to his brother at below-market rates might never be recovered. 3 days after the arrest, I called an emergency meeting with all Mitchell real estate employees. Standing before them in the conference room, I saw confusion and concern on their faces. I want to thank you all for coming, I began. As you've likely heard, there's been a significant situation involving identity fraud within our company. Murmurs spread through the room. Angela, the receptionist who had unwittingly dealt with Melanie Asme for months, looked particularly distressed. My sister, Melanie Mitchell, has been impersonating me for some time, conducting business meetings and making decisions without my knowledge or consent. She was assisted by Timothy Wilson, our former accountant. Ms. Mitchell, Angela said, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I should have known it wasn't you. There were little things that seemed off, but I never imagined. This isn't anyone's fault, I assured her and the others. Melanie and I look similar, and she deliberately styled herself to enhance the resemblance. She had access to my clothes, my home, my personal information. She studied my mannerisms and speech patterns. This was a sophisticated deception. The relief in the room was palpable. Still, I knew rebuilding trust with my team would take time. As we began the process of reviewing all decisions and transactions made during Melanie's impersonation, another difficult aspect of the fallout emerged: family division. Despite the evidence, some relatives couldn't accept Melanie's guilt or the extent of her deception. My cousin Diana, who had unknowingly helped by notarizing fraudulent documents, was devastated. I thought I was helping Cassandra, she told me tearfully over coffee. Melanie said you were too busy to come in person. She had your ID, your credit cards. She knew things only a sister would know. How could I have questioned it? You couldn't have known, I assured her, though the damage had been done. Other family members were less repentant. My Uncle George, my father's brother, had always had a soft spot for Melanie. She may have gone too far, he said during an uncomfortable family dinner Aunt Patricia insisted on hosting, but you have to admit, Cassandra, you did get everything in the will. Maybe if grandmother had been more equitable. Equity doesn't justify fraud, identity theft, or potentially murder. Rachel interjected sharply before I could respond. The investigation into my grandmother's death added another layer of family trauma. When preliminary toxicology reports on the exhumed body showed elevated levels of certain compounds consistent with long-term poisoning, the family fractured further. Some refused to believe Melanie capable of such an act, while others recalled disturbing incidents from her childhood that suddenly took on new significance. She was always jealous of you, Aunt Patricia told me over tea one afternoon, her aged hands trembling as she stirred her cup. I remember when you were 16 and won that scholarship. Melanie smiled and congratulated you, but later I found her cutting up the certificate when she thought no one was looking. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. Your parents had just died. You were both grieving. I told myself it was just a phase, that she needed extra understanding. She shook her head sadly. Perhaps if I had spoken up then, things might have been different. These revelations from my family's past continued to emerge as news of Melanie's crimes spread. Old incidents were re-examined, behaviors reinterpreted. The picture that formed was of a lifelong pattern of jealousy and resentment that had finally erupted into criminal action. The most unexpected fallout came a week after the arrests, when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 2 years. Cassandra? It's Brandon. My heart stuttered at the sound of his voice. Brandon Hayes had been my fiancé until our sudden, devastating breakup 2 years earlier. Brandon, I managed. I didn't expect to hear from you. I saw the news about Melanie and Timothy, he said. It's all over the business pages. Yes, it's been quite a situation. There was a pause before he continued. Cass, I need to ask you something. Those emails you supposedly sent me 2 years ago, the ones where you confessed to cheating and said you never loved me, did you write those? My throat tightened. No, Brandon. I never wrote those emails. I never cheated on you. I never stopped loving you. His shaky exhale was audible through the phone. I found it hard to believe, but the emails came from your account. They had details only you would know. Melanie had access to everything, my email, my personal information, my entire life. She was systematically destroying my relationships, including ours. God, Cass. I'm so sorry. I should have talked to you directly instead of just believing those messages. You couldn't have known, I said, echoing the words I'd been repeating to everyone. There's more, Brandon said hesitantly. After we broke up, I started receiving threatening messages. At first, I thought they were from you, but they escalated to the point where I filed a police report. They eventually stopped, but I moved to Chicago partly to get away from the situation. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Melanie didn't want any loose ends. Anyone who knew me well enough might have spotted her deception. The conversation with Brandon opened yet another avenue of investigation, as Detective Rivera began looking into the harassment campaign against him. The deeper we dug, the more extensive Melanie's web of deception appeared. The process of reclaiming my identity and assets was painfully slow. Each day brought new discoveries of accounts compromised, relationships damaged, and decisions made in my name without my knowledge. The business had suffered under Melanie and Timothy's leadership, with several key clients lost due to their aggressive and unprofessional approach. They were focused on short-term gains, my new accountant explained as we reviewed the books. Selling properties quickly, even at reduced prices, to generate cash flow they could divert. The business model you built for long-term growth was being dismantled. As difficult as the business challenges were, the personal betrayal cut deeper. Each night, alone in the house that had been invaded by my sister, I struggled to process the magnitude of her deception and the depth of her hatred for me. I had raised her, loved her, supported her through every phase of her life. How had that love twisted into such malice? The answer came during my first and only jail visit to Melanie, a month after her arrest. She sat across from me in her orange jumpsuit, her appearance already reverting to her natural self without access to hair dye and colored contacts. Why? I asked simply. I want to understand. Melanie studied me for a long moment before answering. Do you remember when we were little before Mom and Dad died? Everyone always said how much I looked like Mom and you looked like Dad. I nodded, unsure where she was going. After the accident, whenever someone would say I looked like Mom, you would correct them. She looks like me, you'd say. I'm raising her now. I had no memory of this, but Melanie continued. You became mother, father, sister, and guardian all at once. My identity became completely tied to yours. I wasn't Melanie Mitchell, I was Cassandra's little sister. The one Cassandra had to raise. The burden Cassandra nobly carried. Her words hit me like physical blows. I never saw you as a burden, I protested. Maybe not consciously, but you shaped me in your image. Decided what I would wear, how I would act, what I would study. Even my friends had to meet your approval. I was trying to protect you, I said. You were controlling me, she countered. And everyone praised you for it. Perfect Cassandra, so responsible, so mature. And then grandmother made it official with her will. You were the worthy one, the heir to her legacy. I was just the afterthought. So you decided to become me? That's your justification? Melanie's laugh was hollow. I didn't decide to become you overnight. It happened gradually. First, I just wanted what you had. Then I realized people responded better when I acted like you. Eventually, I thought, why not just take your place completely? You had everything I wanted. The business, the respect, the identity separate from being someone's sister or granddaughter. And grandmother? I asked, dreading the answer. Did you really poison her? Something flickered in Melanie's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or simply calculation. I gave her tea. Special tea that I told her would help her sleep. It did help her sleep. Eventually, permanently. I felt sick. She loved you, Melanie. She loved you more, she replied flatly. She always did. As our time ended, and the guard came to take Melanie back to her cell, she looked at me one last time. The funny thing is, I was better at being you than you ever were. Ask anyone who dealt with me as Cassandra. I made bolder deals. I took bigger risks. I was living your life better than you ever could. Her parting words haunted me as I left the jail. Not because they were true, but because they revealed how completely Melanie had lost herself in her obsession with becoming me. 6 months after that fateful night when I returned home early to find 99 people in my house, I sat in a courtroom watching my sister being sentenced for her crimes. The trial had been mercifully quick, as both Melanie and Timothy had eventually accepted plea deals in the face of overwhelming evidence. The judge's voice echoed through the hushed courtroom. Melanie Mitchell, you have pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and forgery. The investigation into the death of Eleanor Mitchell continues, with potential additional charges pending those results. Melanie stood straight-backed and expressionless as the judge continued. Your deliberate and sustained campaign to steal your sister's identity and assets shows a disturbing level of premeditation and malice. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 10 years, depending on the outcome of the ongoing investigation into your grandmother's death. Timothy received 8 years for his role in the conspiracy. His brother Frank, who had knowingly purchased properties at fraudulent prices, was awaiting his own trial. As Melanie was led away in handcuffs, she turned briefly to look at me. There was no remorse in her eyes, only a hollow emptiness that chilled me to the bone. The sister I had raised and loved was gone, replaced by a stranger consumed by jealousy and resentment. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about the Mitchell identity theft case that had captured public attention. With Rachel beside me, I gave a brief statement. Today brings a measure of justice, but no real satisfaction. This case has revealed how vulnerable our identities and relationships are in today's world. I hope others can learn from this experience and protect themselves from similar betrayals, even from those closest to them. The business recovery had been my primary focus during the months leading up to the trial. Mitchell Real Estate Holdings had suffered significant damage, both financially and reputationally, from Melanie and Timothy's actions. Several clients had withdrawn their business, uncomfortable with the scandal or directly harmed by the fraudulent dealings. The process of rebuilding trust with business associates was painstaking. I met personally with each major client, explaining the situation and detailing the new safeguards we had implemented to prevent similar fraud in the future. It's not that we don't trust you, Cassandra, one longtime client told me frankly. But how do we know who we're really dealing with? Your own sister impersonated you successfully for months. It was a fair question, and one that led to implementing new verification protocols for all business transactions. Biometric identification, video conference requirements for major decisions, and a completely restructured financial oversight system were just the beginning. The family relationships were harder to repair. The revelations about Melanie had created deep divisions, with some relatives still struggling to accept the truth despite the evidence and guilty pleas. Aunt Patricia had become my strongest ally, moving temporarily into my guest house to help me through the aftermath. At 84, she brought a perspective and wisdom that helped ground me during the most difficult days. Family isn't just about blood, she told me one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. It's about choice. Some blood relatives will betray you, while others who aren't related at all will stand by you through anything. The trick is knowing which is which. Her words prompted me to reach out to Brandon again. Our initial conversation after Melanie's arrest had been brief and awkward, both of us still processing the revelation that our breakup had been engineered by Melanie's deception. When he answered my call, the familiar warmth in his voice brought back a flood of memories. I'm going to be in Boston next week for a conference, he said after we'd exchanged updates. Maybe we could meet for coffee? Just to talk. I'd like that, I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Our coffee meeting extended into dinner, and dinner into a long walk along the Charles River. Brandon had established himself successfully in Chicago, heading the architectural division of a major development firm. The distance and time apart had changed us both, but as we talked, the connection that had drawn us together originally remained intact. I should have trusted what I knew about you, he said as we stopped to watch the boats on the river. Deep down, those emails never felt like they came from the Cassandra I knew. I let hurt and pride cloud my judgment. We both became victims of Melanie's manipulation, I said. She knew exactly how to drive wedges between people. As spring turned to summer, Brandon and I began cautiously rebuilding our relationship, this time with eyes wide open to the vulnerabilities that had allowed Melanie to separate us. He relocated back to Boston for a new position, and slowly, we found our way back to each other. The ongoing investigation into my grandmother's death eventually confirmed what Melanie had confessed to me in jail. Toxicology reports identified a slow-acting poison that had been administered over months, gradually weakening Eleanor's heart until it finally gave out. Additional charges were filed, extending Melanie's sentence and eliminating any near-term possibility of parole. The news brought a complex mix of grief and vindication. My grandmother had not simply died of old age, she had been murdered by her own granddaughter out of jealousy and greed. The family struggled to process this final, horrific betrayal. In an effort to channel my pain into something constructive, I established a support group for victims of familial identity theft, a surprisingly common problem that rarely received attention. Meeting others who had experienced similar betrayals by family members helped me understand that what had happened wasn't entirely unique, though the extent of Melanie's deception was extraordinary. The people closest to us have the most access to our personal information, explained Dr. Harriet Chen, a psychologist who specialized in identity theft trauma and advised our group. They know our patterns, our passwords, our personal histories. When they decide to use that information against us, the betrayal is both practical and deeply emotional. Working with this group led me to connect with cybersecurity experts and eventually establish a foundation dedicated to helping victims of identity theft rebuild their lives and secure their digital footprints. It became an unexpected but fulfilling new direction, alongside running the real estate business that was gradually recovering its reputation. A year after Melanie's sentencing, I made the difficult decision to visit her again in prison. Unlike our first visit, this one wasn't about seeking answers or understanding. It was about finding closure for myself. The woman who entered the visiting room barely resembled the sister who had once mimicked me so successfully. Prison had hardened her, stripped away the veneer of sophistication she had cultivated. Yet as she sat across from me, I could still see glimpses of the little girl I had raised after our parents' death. "Why did you come?" she asked, her voice flat. "To tell you that I forgive you," I said simply. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Forgive me? After everything I did?" "I'm not forgiving you for your sake," I clarified. "I'm doing it for mine. Carrying anger and hatred only continues to give you power over my life." Melanie studied me for a long moment. "You know, I really did believe I was better at being you than you were." "That was never the point, Mel. You were supposed to be you. That would have been enough." Something shifted in her expression, not quite remorse, but perhaps recognition. "I don't think I ever knew who me was supposed to be. After Mom and Dad died, I became Cassandra's sister and never figured out who Melanie was." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years, maybe ever. I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "That's on both of us," I admitted. "I was so focused on raising you right, on protecting you, that I probably didn't give you enough room to figure that out. It doesn't excuse what I did." "No, it doesn't. But maybe it helps explain it." As our visiting time came to an end, Melanie hesitated, then asked, "Are you and Brandon back together?" The question surprised me. "We're working on it. Taking things slowly." She nodded. "Good. That's good. He was always right for you." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get, and I accepted it for what it was, a small acknowledgement of the harm she had caused. Back home, I continued the process of rebuilding my life and redefining what family meant to me. 6 months after my last visit with Melanie, I hosted a small gathering at my home. Not the grand family reunion she had staged, but an intimate dinner with the people who had truly supported me through the ordeal. Aunt Patricia was there, of course, along with Cousin Diana, who had worked tirelessly to help undo the legal damage her unwitting notarization had caused. Brandon attended, now officially back in my life, as we planned our future together. Rachel came with her husband and a few close friends who had stood by me when others had believed Melanie's lies. As we gathered in the dining room, I looked around at these faces, some related by blood, others by choice, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before Melanie's betrayal. Above the table hung a small, tasteful banner that read, "Family is what we make it." As we raised our glasses in a toast, I realized that while Melanie had taken much from me, time, money, trust, she had inadvertently given me something valuable too. The wisdom to discern true family from false, and the strength to rebuild what matters most. "To family," I said, raising my glass. The one we choose, the one that chooses us, and the one we build together. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family betrayal and how you found healing afterward. Has karma ever caught up with someone who betrayed your trust? The journey from victim to survivor is never easy, but sharing our stories helps us all feel less alone. Please drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and if this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice touched you, hit the like button to let me know. Subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you all for being part of my healing journey by listening to my story, and remember, true family is defined by love and loyalty, not just shared DNA.